What's up? Welcome to the Squad Show. I'm Sam Ekstrom, and the least shocking news of the week. Dillon Brooks has said something a little bit dumb.
Hey guys, I'm Parker Fox with Big Ten Network and KFAN. And if I'm the Wolves, I kind of like the 4 spot, seeing Oklahoma City versus seeing San Antonio in that second round of the playoffs.
Julia Daniels, KARE 11 sports reporter. Rob Dillingham has opened up a little bit about his time with the Wolves. What does it say about where he's at right now?
I'm Jack Borman, co-host of the Locked On Wolves postcast with my man Luke Inman. And I think the Wolves might be in a better spot defensively this year than they were last year heading into the playoffs.
This is Locked On's Wolves Squad Show, the twice-a-week show where Timberwolves talk gets real. No filters, no fluff. Just raw takes, sharp opinions, and straight-up passion for the game. The way only Locked On Podcast Network knows how. Let's drop some dimes and squad up. The Wolves Squad Show starts now.
What's up? Welcome in. Happy Tuesday. It's the Wolves Squad Show, episode number 3, streaming live on Locked On Wolves, audio free and available always on the Locked On Wolves podcast feed. Wherever you get your podcast, make sure you're checking out Ben Beacon and his daily dose of Timberwolves content, 5 days a week, 30 minutes, Timberwolves basketball. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game. Lots to get to today. Are the Wolves better positioned this year than last year? And if not, why? We dissect all of that. Plus, the San Antonio Spurs are scorching. Is that looking like a pretty imposing second-round matchup if the Wolves fall into it, if they get to the second round? And we've got some interesting quotes from Dillon Brooks and Rob Dillingham about the Minnesota Timberwolves, plus the West Coast swing begins. Lakers tonight, Clippers tomorrow. We get into all of that on today's Wolves Squad Show. You met the crew. Let's dive into it. Parker, the Timberwolves in 2024-25 were at one point 32-29. We forget that. Like 61 games into the season, they were barely a 500 team. Then they rolled to the finish. They won 2 playoff series, and we forget that. So in at least one sense, these Timberwolves are already further along than last year's Timberwolves. I would venture to say that the list of positives stacking up for this team versus last year's team, it's pretty extensive. Would you agree that this is a group that's as well or better equipped to make a deep playoff run than last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think last year, like the Wolves were very elite at the top. And that talks about your starting lineup, maybe your 6-man. I think this year they might be deeper 1 through 9. And I think that's a credit to the organization. I think that's a credit to Tim Conley and kind of identifying what they needed moving forward throughout the season. And I look at, Kyle Anderson, I look at Ayo Dosunmu. We don't know what's going to happen with Bones Highland, but I still like Bones Highland, Terrence Shannon Jr., Jalen Clark. Like I talked about it last episode, the defensive versatility that you have with all these guys. And then you bring in a guy like Kyle Anderson, and he's the definition of defensive versatility. I love to talk about the defensive side of the ball because when you play, you know the importance, right? And I've highlighted it. As you go into the playoffs, that's what you're talking about. You're talking about matchups. I don't know if you guys watched last night, this Oklahoma City and Denver game, but you saw the matchup that Denver was trying to throw at Shea, and now granted, he's MVP level and he makes a big shot at the end, but defense becomes so prevalent in front of us right now. And I think that's something when you look at this Wolves, roster and lineup. Last year, they were pretty good defensively as well. But this year, I think they just have more versatility on the defensive side of the ball. And I am still looking for that guard play defense to show up, because as you get on to guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and the Oklahoma City Thunder, you sometimes just need a single guy to step up and be a defensive stopper. Maybe that's Jalen Clark. Maybe that's Terrence Shannon. Who knows? Maybe that's Kyle Anderson. But at the end of the day, somebody's got to step up and be a defensive kind of peak performer for this Wolves team. So I really like where they're at right now, Sam, and I'm excited to see over these next 15, 20 games, whatever it may be, how they kind of just diversify themselves defensively.
I'd like to hear Jack defend his cold open as well, because you think they're in a good spot defensively, and I think with Rudy on the floor Absolutely. But you look at the on-off numbers, Jack. It's a 10-point differential when Rudy's off. That's worse than last year. It's way worse than 2 years ago. Why do you think this team is better defensively?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it has to do with bringing Kyle Anderson into the fold, right? I think a huge reason why they were so much better 2 years ago is because their numbers with the Kyle Anderson, Naz Reid front court, they had a sub 105 defensive rating in those minutes, which is absolutely tremendous. It would be the best in the NBA this season. So I think that that's a huge part of it. And then the other part of it for me, Luke and I have talked about it all the time. The last couple of years, the Timberwolves have really struggled to defend really quick guards. And a lot of these teams have really quick guards that they can bring off the bench that oftentimes play in those non-Rudy minutes. And I think Adesumu is an upgrade from Nickeil Alexander-Walker in that I think he's just got quicker feet than Nickeil does. I think Nickeil probably does a better job navigating ball screens and in defending, guys that might be a little bit bigger than Io. But I think in terms of, you look at the Toronto game the other night, I mean, Jamal Shedd's a really, really good, backup point guard option. And I would assume we pretty much took him out of the game completely. So you have that part of it. And then, I mentioned slow-mo. I think, we've seen it now since he's gotten here that, Jaden's been in foul trouble, Rudy's been in foul trouble, and Chris Finch has gone to him in both of those situations as a guy that you can turn to. And I think, especially when Rudy would get in foul trouble last year, the only real options that the Wolves could turn to after that were more offensively tilted players, whether you have a guy like Naz or TJ, or bringing Julius off the bench earlier, if he, Naz came in for him, and then you quick go back to Julius. So I think being able to go to Kyle Anderson is another guy that can step right in and play really solid defense either on the wing or inside, and be able to rebound really well too is important. And then the other part of it too is the Johan Berenjay part of the equation too. I think that if the Wolves need 2 or 3 minutes from him, that's something that they didn't have last season. That I think that they certainly would be willing to turn to if the situation called for it. We saw, a young player without a lot of NBA experience get put in some pretty huge moments last playoffs with TJ Shannon. And so, I think a big reason why the Timberwolves have Johan Berenjay down in Iowa right now is so that he can continue to play, so that he can stay ready, for those moments potentially. After the G League season, once the playoffs kind of turn on for him to be ready to go. So I think that the Wolves have a lot of options, which is always a good place to be. And I just think the options that they have this year are a little bit more, well-rounded and versatile than they were last season.
Julia, let me give you a few areas that I would perceive as improvements from last year. Tell me what you think could influence a playoff run the most. So we've talked about deeper bench. I would agree with that. I think Anthony Edwards has a little bit of a deeper offensive game and an understanding of how to face double teams. I think that's improved. I think Jaden McDaniels has taken it to another level offensively. What of those do you think could help the Wolves advance deep into the playoffs once again?
I think I would go with Ant for sure. I mean, I think he's one of the huge reasons that this team, we've seen him grow up this season for sure. And he's been instrumental in making this offense more efficient, would you guys say? When I was looking at the stats that the NBA was posting, they're like 4th in scoring, 3rd overall in field goal percentage, 5th in three-point percentage. And Ant has a huge role in that. I think Jaden, I think those kind of go hand in hand in that too, is I would rank Ant first because I think he's most instrumental in affecting that. But then Jaden is right there behind him too. So I would rank that second in terms of the choices that you gave me there. But Ant's, I think when we've watched him in the playoffs the past 2 years, it has felt like, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, it's kind of felt like he's fallen off the further they got into the postseason. And I think this year he's equipped himself to make that run and go the distance. I also think it's interesting you talking about the depth too, because it's not necessarily that they have, I wouldn't even say it's more players in terms of depth, but it's just the ability and the stability of the guys that they have on the bench now is completely different than what they've had in the postseason the last few years. And I think Io is a huge proponent of that, but I also think bringing in Kyle Anderson also helps with that too, because we talked about it last week in terms of Finchie's going to go shorter on the bench as they move closer to the postseason, but the playmaking abilities of the guys that they have out there too. But if I had to rank those, I would say Ant for sure. Just his game. He's having a career best season despite the flaws that we do talk about that he still has in his game. He's having an almost MVP-like season, especially when you look at the numbers, even if he's not necessarily an MVP contender himself this year. But I think that hopefully we're going to see Ant kind of go the distance in these playoffs, and I think he's been instrumental, especially in the turnaround since the All-Star break.
Yeah, that is what I tend to hang my hat on, is that whatever deficiencies, lackadaisical effort that we see in the regular season from guys like Ant, guys like Julius, Jaden at times maybe, it's very believable that they defend at a higher level in the postseason. We saw it from Julius last year. He played great in the postseason. He defended hard. I think we can see that from Ant in the postseason. So if you want to knock the regular season defense, the priors suggest that will get better. Now, Parker, can you find an area that you're legitimately concerned about last year to this year? I wrote down Mike Conley, a less viable option, no Nikhil, and free throw shooting. Those are my three red flag areas. What are you most concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, I love all three. I look at the Nikhil bit. That's something that it was on my mind as we went into this season. A little bias, I will admit, just because I love Nikhil's really everything, but his energy and just his intentionality that he played with. I think that's something that really goes kind of by the wayside a little bit when you talk about an 82 game NBA season. It seemed like Nikhil showed up for everyone, whether that was making a big corner three, whether that was taking the defensive role on whoever's best player. So I like that one. Just talking about a player that really shows up every single game, and we know how it is, right? Is like the playoffs will come about, and everybody will hopefully show up, and you'll give your best energy and your best effort. But losing a guy like that was something that I really identified early on in the season. Is how do you replace that? I went to Terrence Shannon Jr. right away. That's the first name that I kind of came up with at the beginning of the season, and there's some injuries, there's some things that happened here or there that wasn't really the answer. So then I've kind of flipped to, okay, what can Dante DiVincenzo give you? And as great as he's been lately, he has some of these games sometimes, like we've seen against Orlando, where you go for 6 and you have 0 points and you just don't contribute the way you need to contribute on the NBA level. And those are going to happen, right? Those are hopefully they're very few, but they might happen. Is how can you impact the game in other ways? And that's something that I always saw from Nickeil Alexander-Walker, is maybe that shot wasn't falling, but here I am, 94 feet, guarding somebody down in the stance. So I think that's something that we can continue to identify as we go along. And it doesn't need to be one person either, Sam. It can be a team effort of Jaden, of Dante. But you look at that Orlando game, and when the scoring isn't there, how can you impact the game in other ways? And I think that's something that it's a big effect. We always talk about impacting winning. If you can do that, it doesn't need to be on the point sheet. You got to find ways to impact winning.
Jack, your number one concern?
Yeah, I think my number one concern is just, you get games like what we had against Orlando, right? Is that, Anthony Edwards really brings it as a scorer, but who's bringing it as a scorer behind him, right? I think last season, Julius Randle was a lot more consistent as a number 2 scorer last season than he has been this season. And, you hope that he'll be able to find that down the rest of the stretch of the season and into the postseason. But that's certainly no guarantee. And I think too, we've certainly had games where, love Anthony Edwards to death, but sometimes just ball hogs a little too hard. And whether that's him sensing that no one else has it, or him not getting guys involved enough, it's kind of a chicken or the egg situation. But I think that, he's certainly been prone to those types of situations where he's not exactly helping other people get going in order to help him in the scoring department. So I think that that's probably my biggest concern. I think when you think about a series, I think this team does a really good job of paying attention to the details in the game plan and the scouting report, especially if you stay out of that play-in situation. You pretty much get a week just to practice and key in on who your opponent is and what that needs to look like. And so I think that's really helped guys like Jaden and Nas who have been playoff risers on the offensive end of the floor the last few seasons, which certainly helps. But then I think you also probably just need to have some hard conversations around, what do we want the shot distribution to look like, right? And I think far too often it's been a situation where Ant's taken in the upper 20s, Julius or Jaden is taking 12 or 13, and then no one else is taking more than 7 shots or something like that. And so I think the Wolves just need to really, I think, lock in on ensuring that everybody's getting touches, everybody's getting opportunities to get shots up, and just kind of stay in a rhythm offensively, because we all know what that looks like when I think guys get out of rhythm, and then it just kind of becomes Ant, please save us. And for as good as Ant is, there's certainly been games when he's been able to do that this season, no question about it. But I don't think that's I don't think that's where you want to be as a team, living and dying with one player in the postseason.
Yeah, Julia, the thing that made me pull my hair out last year with the team was turnovers, just sloppy, reckless, and it pops up from time to time. I think a little more controlled this year. The new thing this year is that the free throw shooting has been so abysmal, and very oddly so, because you've got the same team, right? You've got the same top 8 guys or top 7 of 8 guys, and they're shooting 28th in the league from the line. In the playoffs, when points are at a premium, you're trying to get to the line, you got to make your free throws. I'm already losing sleep thinking about a tight game and Julius going 1 for 2 in a key spot.
I know. It's funny that you mentioned that, because I always watch the Wolves playoffs games with my best friend, Allie, and she's not a big basketball person, but she will watch postseason basketball with me. And we go to different bars and watch and have our little watch parties. And every single time that the Wolves miss a free throw in the playoffs, it's like trauma for me at this point, because she sits there and she screams and embarrasses us in public and says, you should be fined in the NBA if you're missing free throws. She's like, you should be losing money at this point if you're missing your free throws. But I think when you boil it down to everything, when it comes to free throws, that is all a mind game for you. It's there's nothing else there except for you, the ball, and the hoop. And it's something that goes down to even Chris Finch said after the Orlando game that they had mental lapses. That's not something that you can have happening to your team. And that's what, when you're missing free throws, that's all that's happening, I would argue, at that point. And so I think that this Wolves team has grown up this season. I think it helps now that they kind of have their solid core too. And Julius, you're not in the same spot that you were last year with Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. They are very much veterans of this team now. And I think that goes into the trust that everybody has, and overall just the mental capacity of the team as a whole, and especially when it comes to the postseason. But I think when you see something happen like what happened to them versus Orlando, it's still definitely on the forefront of everybody's mind. And free throws are something that you've got to figure out. And I think it comes to figuring out what's going on mentally with the guys, why that's happening, and where the consistency is going in terms of just where your mind is at while you're playing the game.
Yeah, it's kind of unbelievable that at this point in the season you still have those lapses, but it's not going to be perfect. It's hard to win in the NBA on a consistent basis. We've got plenty to get to playoff-wise. Spurs or Thunder, pick your poison. Which matchup actually is going to be tougher in the postseason? That's next on the Squad Show. We're brought to you today by Gametime. There's nothing like being at the arena, whether that's NBA, NHL, NFL. Getting tickets, though, that can be a little tricky. It's not always been so simple because there's hidden fees in different places, and there's scams now. If you try to meet up with someone that you talk to on Craigslist and get tickets, you got to watch out for that stuff. Gametime cuts through all of that nonsense. They make it really easy for you. Pick an upcoming game and see how low you can go with the ticket prices. I'm looking at right now the Wild, $51 to get in the building tonight. Wolves are going on a road trip when they eventually come home on the 17th. $19 entry as they take on the Suns and Dillon Brooks. We'll talk about him a little bit later, but Game Time's got the pricing all up front, no hidden fees, views from your seat. Zone deals are great. You choose the section. Game Time picks the seats you save. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account. Use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today, and remember, it's gametime.co, not .com. All right, Spurs or Thunder? That's the question right now. I would have never imagined asking it because the Thunder are such a juggernaut, and they're still a juggernaut, and their point differential is still insane. But the Spurs have beaten them 4 out of 5. The Spurs have won 15 of 16, and of those 15 wins, only 3 were by single digits. They are crushing teams. They are blitzing teams right now, and Wemby is coming into his own. So, Jack, you tweeted the other day I think it was something like, this is how you beat the Spurs in the playoffs. Number 1, hope they shoot less than 30% from 3. Number 2, pray. That sounds like a Jack Borman who's got a little trepidation about facing Wemby in the postseason.
Yeah, I think if you separate Jack Borman, the basketball fan, from Jack Borman, the basketball analyst, I would love to go against the Jack Borman, the fan, would love to see the Spurs in a playoff series, just because, one of my best friends growing up lives in Austin, and give me 7 games of Victor Wembanyama would be awesome to watch. But yeah, as an analyst, it's a little bit of a different story, right? I think, Jace Frederick, the Wolves beat writer for the Pioneer Press, responded to that tweet saying, the Spurs are 27-2 when they shoot 37% or better from 3. And for reference, Julia said it earlier, the Wolves are 5th this season in 3-point percentage at 37%. So, it's just crazy how efficient this team is. And they're super, I just think they're super connected as a basketball team. And for a team that's as young as they are and have guys that should theoretically still be finding their footing as NBA players, to be that bought into what their roles are is super impressive. And then I think, the other aspect of it too is they just have 48 minutes of really good guard play between, being able to cycle between De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, and Dylan Harper, who, has been really up and down this season, but when he's up is pretty impressive. And then you also factor in the fact that the Spurs are top 5 in offense, defense, rebounding, paint differential, fast break differential, turnovers, and they have a super deep bench. I mean, it's pretty impressive that it could just be any guy's night on any given night. And the Spurs have gotten a lot of, just different contributions from guys up and down their rotation. And then you also think about the fact that they have, just a perfect prototypical 3-and-D guy in Carter Bryant, kind of waiting in the wings for when Harrison Barnes maybe matriculates on to his next stop or retires or whatever the case may be. So it's pretty crazy. And also too, like, the Spurs are a league average 3-point shooting team at 35%. And for them to be a top 5 offense despite that is pretty crazy. And you have to be a really efficient team from 2, which helps. And then the last part of it for me is this team just gets off to super fast starts in a lot of these games that they've been winning, and trying to come back against a team that has Stephon Castle on the wing, who's emerged as a really good perimeter defender, wing stopper this year, with Victor Wembanyama, who's going to be Defensive Player of the Year if he plays enough games this year, roaming the paint, is just really hard to come back against, and kind of forces you to just start chucking from 3. And that strategy, or kind of that philosophy, has worked out really, really well for the Spurs, why they've been on this huge push. And I would not rule out them getting the 1 seed. I mean, they're only 3 games back of OKC. So gonna be really fascinating to watch down the stretch.
Yeah, and they got the tiebreaker. Julia, Wolves are 2-1 against the Spurs this year, 2-1 against the Thunder. Wemby only played in 2 of those games. Wolves had to come from behind in both of them. They completed the comeback in 1, thanks to Ant. And then Ant went ballistic in the other one, and Wemby just one-upped him at the very end. But some great battles in those 2 games, Wemby versus Ant. I think the biggest question around the Spurs would just be, they haven't been in the battles before in
Right.
the postseason. Can a young team just go from 0 to 60 and take it the distance? Can Wemby hold up with playoff physicality for 4 series?
That's what I was going to bring up, is that I do like how the Wolves match up with the Spurs, just because the Wolves, they are big and tall, and you don't have a lot of teams in the NBA that are big and tall like the Spurs. And so any advantage that the Spurs tend to have against a lot of teams that they're playing kind of gets diminished a little bit when they're playing the Wolves. But I do think that the experience is important. I don't think I think when it comes to a Wolves team that we're finally not talking about being inexperienced in the playoffs, that is a huge advantage for them if they are playing the Spurs. I also think sometimes they don't have an answer for Ant when he's playing them. And like you said before, he obviously had some great games against them, but it's almost like whenever the Wolves are playing the Spurs, the one thing that they have on them is that it feels like they're like just wreaking havoc. And then the Spurs, that's kind of the vibe that I get when I'm watching the two play. And then it's all of a sudden the Spurs are like, oh, this is unlike any team that we're really matching up with across the league. So I think experience is huge, because we've seen, how the Wolves have crumbled in the playoffs because they had all of the tools that they needed. They just didn't know what to do. It is different basketball when you get to that point in the season. And so I'm interested to see I'm not going to completely count them out. I do think they're a dangerous matchup for the Wolves, but I do think that the Wolves definitely have an advantage when it comes to getting to postseason basketball. But I do think also Rudy's like the second best defensive player in the league right now. And so that also poses a problem that the Spurs aren't seeing when they play the Thunder, or they're playing anybody else. And so I think that there's just some differences that come to the Spurs. I mean, I think when you have a young team that is inexperienced, they do get into their way of winning. And when they're facing the Wolves, the way of winning doesn't necessarily work for them. And that's why the Wolves are 2-1 against them this season. And so I think that would be a great matchup. I think I would rather see, I think that I would rather see the Wolves face the Spurs than the Thunder. And I would put money on the Wolves over the Spurs in that matchup, just because of the experience that they already have.
I think we'd rather travel to San Antonio than Oklahoma City after what happened to you guys last year.
Because OKC is the worst place to get to, and I'm traumatized from going to the Western Conference Finals last year. That was terrible.
Those games didn't go very well either out there.
No, they didn't. The Wolves didn't even make it worth the trauma.
No, especially game 5. Parker, I worry about Julius against the Spurs, because if I'm San Antonio, tell me if I'm wrong, I think I would just take my chances with Rudy and put not Wem. I would just have Wemby shut down Julius. And even if he's not guarding Julius, to be honest, even if he's just in the area, that can kind of slow. Julius is such a post-up game. He bangs away. He gets to the rim, has that ability to finish. But when I look at his box scores this year against the Spurs, when Wemby played, he was 4 of 11 and 4 of 13, pretty inefficient.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because kind of when the cat trade went down with Julius, I always, and I wasn't like this crazy Julius, fan, and I was watching Julius every single night, but I thought there was a little bit more point forward in his game than we've kind of seen. Now, it hasn't been bad per se, but I think, like you said, if that is the matchup, if that's something that San Antonio looks at is, hey, we're just going to put this DPOY type of guy on Julius, Julius got to recognize that, right? And I think so many times Wolves fans get frustrated with Julius just because he does so well at getting in the paint, banging the body. And it seems like when he gets 2 feet in the paint, it's never getting sprayed to the outside. It's usually going up, or, he's trying to draw a foul or something like that. So I think if you're Julius, can you recognize that? Can you recognize what's going on within the game, and how can I get other people involved, right? How can I share the love, as one would say? Something we've been asking Anthony Edwards to do more as well. And I think that's going to be kind of a trending topic as we go on throughout, this Wolves, regular season and into the playoffs, is what do these assist numbers look like, and how can we continue to improve them, not only from an individual standpoint, but from a team basis. Is what is our assist to field goal percentage looking like, and how can we continue to get easy baskets for your teammates? So I think you're right. But then vice versa on the defensive end. If I'm the Wolves, and we know that there's some different combinations. We've seen the French vanilla combination down there in San Antonio with Big Luke in the inside and with Wemby. So I think there's different things that they can do. But if I'm the Wolves, I put Julius on Wemby as well, and I use that physicality. You got 6 fouls for a reason. Be physical with him over a 7-game series. Make life difficult for him. But like Julius said, this is a very chaotic type of San Antonio team, and I think that's something where if you rein it in the right direction, it can really be an advantage because you can win in a lot of different ways. So there's going to be a lot of different mismatches, a lot of different matchup nightmares. But I think if you look at this over a 7-game series, you take one game at face value for what it is, and then you make adjustments as you go on. I still favor the Wolves.
Speaking of teams that could play the Spurs in the playoffs, probably going to be the Phoenix Suns in the first round. Dillon Brooks is on their team, and he's looking past the Spurs. He's looking ahead. He wants to face the Timberwolves in the playoffs. We'll have some fun at Dillon Brooks' expense when we come back. And we're brought to you today by TurboTax. It's tax time. For a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. You book an appointment. It's usually not convenient. You sit in a waiting room. You've got your paper clips and your folders, and you've got all the forms. You're emailing back and forth. You're wondering, what have you gotten yourself into with this accountant who you've never met? Well, this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. Meet face-to-face with a real tax expert. Your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot, and just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve, while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in, meeting a real person, and walking out with your mind set at ease, knowing your taxes are being handled right. So head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. Make taxes easy this year. Be sure to check out Ben Beacon on Locked On Wolves, daily Wolves content, 30-minute dose. Ben is awesome. Just did an episode actually on Rudy's case as a Defensive Player of the Year, even though that probably won't happen with Wemby being in the league. Now, Dillon Brooks, I think it was a podcast. Dillon Brooks said the following. If the Wolves run into us, it's going to be problems. We got their number this year. So for reference, they have beaten the Wolves twice. They're 2-0. I would add, though, as a caveat, the Timberwolves were 99.9% winners, Julia, in that first game. This was in the in-season tournament, and the Suns stormed back, and they scored 9 points in 45 seconds, and they won the game. The second time they played, Rudy Gobert was kind of having his way with the Suns, and then he got ejected because he hit somebody too hard. So, I mean, flowers to Dillon Brooks. They've beaten the Wolves twice. I would say I would like to see how the Suns stack up against Wemby and the Spurs in round one before that even happens.
Yeah, I think that they would have a really hard time beating the Spurs in round one. I do think I think Dillon Brooks is just he's talking out of his neck like he always does. He likes to blow a little smoke. He likes to poke the bear. I do think it's interesting when a guy like Dillon Brooks tries to poke the bear at Ant, because Ant's just not the type that's gonna get upset about anything. He's such a go with the flow type of guy. But I do think it was unusual losses to the Suns. I would not say that the Suns are a better team, obviously, but I do think it was when they played and the Wolves lost by 3 points, Jaden, Dante, and Nas, none of them showed up offensively for the team that night. And I will say Dante has really been his game has just kind of gone like this season. And so I think it's just such a Dillon Brooks. Dillon Brooks is going to have some kind of vendetta that he has against every single person. And it's what he does. It's his personality. But I wouldn't say that what did he say? We have their number. I just think that there was a lot of different instances going on and uncharacteristic losses for the Wolves that they've had to the Suns this year. And so if the Wolves clean up some things, also in a playoff series too, you cannot count your uncharacteristic losses in terms of like projecting how a playoff series is going to go, especially against a team like the Wolves. So I think it's just Dillon Brooks talking. I don't think if those two were to match up in the postseason, I would not put money on the Suns to win that in any way, shape, or form.
Someone needs to remind Dillon Brooks, Parker, that a couple of years ago, the Suns kind of swept the season series against the Wolves, and then the Wolves returned the favor with a little sweep of their own in the postseason.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think Julia's right. Nor do I think the Suns have the depth to go a 7-game series with a team like San Antonio right now. I think their top level guys are very talented. I think Devin Booker. He's a top level talent, right? Like he's on that USA team for a reason. He's one of the best shooting guards in the league. He can go for 40 in a single night. But then when you go on past, Devin Booker, is Jalen Green consistently going to score for you throughout a playoff series? Is Gillespie going to continue to score? Do you look to Oso Ighodaro down low? What does Royce O'Neal bring you? So I think there's a lot of question marks when you talk about the depth within a team like the Phoenix Suns. I think it's funny we're having a debate because I just think the Spurs are that good, right? Like I think that's a 4-0 type of matchup. Who guards Wemby in those situations? They don't have a guy for that. They don't have a guy for the depth defensively of their guard position. So Dillon Brooks is going to be Dillon Brooks. I had a Canadian teammate last year in Frank Mitchell who was really close personal friends with Dillon Brooks. So he would have him on the FaceTime all the time, and you just had no idea what was coming out of Dillon Brooks's mouth. Just like Julia said, just spewing different things here and there, just talking junk all day long. And that's Dillon Brooks, right? And I think Julia's exactly right. He's not going to get in a guy like Ant's head, but he could get in a guy like Rudy's head. And I think when you're a guy like Dillon Brooks, you're just looking for anything to kind of stir the pot. And we saw that with Rudy's ejection in that game.
Jack, your thoughts?
Yeah, Dillon Brooks has no reason to be scared of the Wolves, right? I mean, he was part of that Memphis team that beat Minnesota a few years ago, in which Minnesota led for, I think, something like 75 or 80% of the minutes in that series. And so even when their backs were kind of against the wall in those games, they just didn't really flinch. And Phoenix is 2-0 against the Wolves this season, right? So, look, I think the NBA needs players like Dillon Brooks that are willing to mix it up and talk a little trash, and there's no doubt in my mind that players get more excited for matchups with players like that, and I think it makes watching the NBA more fun on a night-to-night basis, knowing that you get those types of matchups. So I love that Dillon Brooks is out there saying stuff like that about especially against the Wolves. I mean, look, we talked about it. The Suns are 2-0. The first one was an improbable comeback. The second one they won without Devin Booker in that game. So again, he's got every reason to talk his trash. And I think Jordan Ott's a really good coach. I think Jordan Ott would probably get my vote for coach of the year this year, or one of them, just considering how hard the deck was stacked against them. I mean, they have a lot of super unselfish and capable shooters, and they shoot a ton of threes. And so, on a one-off night, it can be really difficult to play defense against a team like that. And that certainly has happened against the Timberwolves this season. But I think, again, when you're able to key in on a team and take away what they're really good at, I think it becomes a little bit of a different conversation extrapolated out over a 7-game series when some of the depth disparity, I think, rises to the surface a little bit. And again, I just don't really think that the Suns have somebody who's capable of defending Anthony Edwards for 48 minutes of a 7-game series. And I don't think they really have a lot of good options inside for a player like Julius Randle either. And we saw what Julius Randle did against both the Lakers and the Warriors last season in the postseason when he felt like he had a mismatch or could take advantage of who was guarding him. So I think that all for Dillon Brooks talking his stuff, but I don't know that we'll see a Timberwolves and Suns playoff series unless they're able to climb up to the 6th line.
Yeah, if Dillon Brooks wants to wear down Wemby, for us, and just take him to 6 games and just make that a little better matchup, if it's a 2-3, Wolves and Spurs will take it. But this is a little bit more of on a sadder note. Rob Dillingham spoke at length. He's now with the Bulls, of course, after the trade. And he had a lot of sad quotes, man. Like, Parker, I'll turn it back to you. These are some of the quotes from this Rob Dillingham story. He was mentally drained in Minnesota. He had trust struggles. He asked, am I really good at basketball? And then a little bit of maybe a subtle shot. If there's no transparency, then your player's not going to go that extra mile for you. I think he was referring to kind of his past. So, I mean, Dilly's in a little bit of a hopeless situation in Chicago. He's just desperately trying to prove himself. Do you think Dilly turns into a contributor in this league at some point?
I don't, and it stinks to say because I've been there as a player, right? You have seasons of it, maybe you have a couple games of it, and you're searching, and that searching process, it can be a really dark and lonely place. And whether that's injuries, whether that's just roster makeup, but I think adding a guy like Dilly as a rookie to a team that's going to be in the playoffs, going to have continual success, like it's hard to get the ball in a ball dominant type of player's hands. Like you look at his stuff from Kentucky. Yeah, he was an elite 3-point shooter. So you hope that translates, and it didn't right away. And that's not to say it can't translate as things move on and you go on to the future. But there's a reason why his name is Rob with the shifts, because he's a point guard that needs the ball in his hand. He's a shifty point guard, and he needs to be the one creating stuff. And in the NBA, there's very limited opportunities for that. I remember my process just going from, whether I was going to transfer or whether I was going to move on and try to play professional basketball and what that would look like. And so many people told me, like, you have to find one skill that you are the best at. And for me, that was just my energy and bringing that every single day. And when you look at Rob Dillingham, his best skill is his ball handling and his just having the ball in his hand as a player. And in the NBA, there's not really much time and space for that. So I think you have to adjust, right? And like I said, that can be dark, that could be a process. And I feel for Rob and I feel the emotion coming out in some of these statements. But it's time now for Rob to try to adjust. And if you want to continue to play in this league, we know so many guys, they don't find that second contract. If you could find that second contract, then you're in, right? And now Rob's in a position where he's got to find a way to find that second contract. So as a human, I feel for him. As a basketball player, I feel for him. But to answer your question, Sam, I just don't know if there's, a future key role in the NBA for Rob Dillingham. So, but you have the chance. You have the chance to adjust that, become maybe something that you're not right now. So I think as Wolves fans, we're all hoping the best for Rob Dillingham.
Yeah, in Chicago, it's not been going great, shooting just 37%, 19% from three. Julia, we've had you on the Vikings show a million times on here, and I feel like we're having some similar conversations in that the Vikings have not been a great haven for young players, and nor have the Timberwolves. You have to do certain things, certain fundamentals very well to gain Chris Finch's trust. And it's really come to fruition just in the last few weeks with this replacement of some of the depth to go with more veterans than young players. And Rob just didn't do all of those things he needed to do.
It's hard. I mean, any environment that you jump into where you're the youngest person, it's going to be difficult. I mean, I even relate to this on a personal level. When I got hired at Care 11, I think I was the youngest on-air talent that they had at that time. And the only person younger than me at the station was one of our producers. And so it's daunting. It's a daunting place to be in. And even on that level, which is way scaled down compared to being on a professional sports team, it's hard not to have this like imposter syndrome. I mean, also let's remember Rob Dillingham. He may have, we've seen him with the Wolves for a little bit. He's only 21 years old. The guy was born in 2005. Like, that is crazy to me. And when I was reading the articles that we were looking at before, when you sent out the topics, I was like, 21. It's sometimes you forget that, because I do think sometimes Rob does come across as older just personality wise, but then when you do see him out there on the basketball court, you're like, wow, this guy has a lot to learn. I think it's just hard. It is hard. And whenever you look at any pro sports team where you bring in a young guy into a veteran group, they're always going to have some kind of struggle. That's just how it works. We've seen it, like you said, with the Vikings. Then you take a look at the teams that were in the Super Bowl this year, and they're all young guys that came in all together, and then they figured it all out together, and everyone's on the same. I mean, that's how teams work. It's a mental capacity type of thing. But I feel bad for Rob in a sense. But I also think like this is the NBA, so how bad do I really feel for him when it comes to that? I do think his jumper's kind of fallen off since he was in college, so that's something. I'm not willing to call him like a true bust just yet, but I also think he's undersized for the league, and he's not able to finish at the rim. He's not able to do a lot of things that a lot of guys in his same position are able to do just because they have a few inches on him, and that's going to be a huge detriment to him. I think when it comes to like Parker's talking about trying to find your niche, I think he's trying to do that defensively and just kind of be this chaotic, disruptive player out on the floor, but that's also still a struggle for him. I think maybe in the off season, take some time and just sit and watch film like what Ant did last off season, and then just watch and see what's going on, because he's not really like able to be a real floor general in a sense. Like he's not out there reading plays. He's not able to do that very well either. And so I think maybe it's the transitioning from like college basketball to NBA, which everybody knows is a hard transition and a rough transition to make. But I think he's young, he's undersized, and if he does want to stay in the NBA, he has to make some drastic changes in the offseason.
Yeah, Jack, I recall you really liking the trade up for him. And we saw glimpses as a rookie when Dante got hurt. Rob got about 16 minutes a game, and he flashed at times. There were good moments, and he's mired in this sophomore slump. He gets traded, and that's that for your first round pick. But when you're undersized, is it pretty simple to say you need to be unbelievable on the offensive end to make up for some deficiencies with your size, and he just didn't. He was not that on a regular basis, and at times a liability on that end.
For sure. And I think, I was super excited by the pick, and it was a super shrewd trade independent of who they selected. That was something that opposing front offices marveled at Tim Connolly and his staff of, coming up with something that creative, trading a pick, 7 years down the line for somebody who, you're getting rights to a player. So there's no money exchange. So you don't have to worry about the salary cap with that. So part of it was also just kind of how smart the move was. But, for Rob, he was that at Kentucky. He was unbelievable offensively. I mean, Rob Dillingham at Kentucky shot 44% from three on 144 attempts. And Rob has taken in his NBA career 133 attempts and is shooting just 31.6% from three. So I think, can Rob Dillingham be a productive NBA player? I certainly think he can. And I think that the biggest driver of that is his floor game is really remarkable. I think he has a really strong handle, has shown the ability to get really kind of hot as a playmaker and make some really high level passes and advanced reads to set guys up. And I think is a really good pick and roll playmaker, which is something that you need. But again, if that 3-point shot is a guy that's listed as 6'2", 175, there's no way he's 6'2". I would be shocked if he's actually 175 pounds. You have to be able to shoot the three. I mean, you talk about like Colin Gillespie, Parker, or even a guy in the Timberwolves own locker room like Mike Conley, who isn't that tall, but is just a super efficient offensive player. And so I think for Rob, it just comes down to the jump shot and then finding stability, right? I mean, you look at the last 7 years of Rob Dillingham's life, he's played for 7 different basketball teams. And, those are 7 different teams trying to do 7 different things with different philosophies and all that sort of stuff. So I think, Parker mentioned trying to get a second contract, and Julia mentioned just how daunting it is coming in as such a young guy to a team that has such high expectations. There's certainly a lot of that going on. And I think that for Rob, it's trying to find a place where you're going to be able to play. And I think for him, kind of having no ego and being willing to go play in the G League, if that's what it takes to play, 30 minutes or 35 minutes every single game in order to kind of reestablish some rhythm and chemistry and get to know a team and its system. would be really good for him. And I hope for Rob that he can find it. And all the interactions I had with him, seems like a really nice kid. And I know that as a dude was well liked within the within the Timberwolves locker room. So certainly I think one thing that I really like about this fan base across all sports is that I think they tend to remember guys and look out for them and root for them. And with Rob Dillingham, I certainly think it'll be no different.
Wolves kick off a 4-game road trip tonight. They're favored in LA. LeBron's questionable. Wolves Lakers talk when we wrap the show and we return on the Squad Show. We're brought to you today by FanDuel. College basketball's nonstop. Conference tournaments have been so electric so far. So many buzzer beaters, so many big shots, half-court shots, dramatic finishes, and we're just getting started with the big tournament around the corner. And FanDuel is giving you a way to turn all that excitement into big potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. Build any college hoops parlay you want. Rivalry games, ranked matchups. You got the 1 versus the 16. You got the 8-9, the 7-10s, the 5-12s coming up. Oh, I can't wait to fill out a bracket. You can mix the spreads, the totals, the player props. Just put together an entry that you really feel good about. Then you apply the profit boost and instantly bump up the potential payout. So go safe, go bold, ride with the team you've been following all season, whatever. It's your parlay. It's your style. Now with more upside behind it. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game. And I got to get an answer from Parker. How over under 1.5 Big Ten tournament games the Gophers win?
Ooh, I love them in this matchup against Rutgers, and they had UCLA at home. I think I have to go under just because if they win, they play UCLA, a team that they beat already. So UCLA is going to be coming for some vengeance, but I'm cheering on my Gophs.
I love making Mick Cronin mad, though. It's
it's
watching the press conferences after a UCLA loss, especially when it's your team. Oh, it's so good.
You should see me and Dawson Garcia's chats back and forth about that. It's absolutely hilarious, no doubt.
Yeah, maybe we can show those someday.
Off fair.
If they're appropriate, maybe not. The Timberwolves play the Lakers tonight. It's in LA. They got the Clippers tomorrow, but tonight they're 2.5-point favorites against a possibly LeBron-less Lakers team. Jack, this is obviously a rematch of last year's playoffs. The teams haven't met in forever. They played twice very early this season. Wolves lost both of them, including an Austin Reeves buzzer beater when the Lakers were having a rest night for people. That was still a stupid loss. How do you feel about tonight now that these teams are a little more set in their identities?
Yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot you can glean from those first two matchups. I think that the number one thing for me is you just got to keep Luka away from the rim, right? I mean, he's shooting 80% at the rim, which is absolutely ridiculous. And you just got to keep him out of the paint as best you can, because once he gets in there, he's such an efficient scorer and then just can get everybody else involved and put you in a bind. I think you got to hope that you can force him to take more 3-pointers than he does free throw attempts, and that certainly didn't happen in the only other matchup that Luka's played against the Wolves this season. He had 49, 11, and 8. Took 19 free throws in that game. So got to force the others to beat you, I think. And unfortunately for the Wolves, the others have been playing pretty well. When you think about a guy like Luke Kennard came in from the Hawks, the trade deadline's been really, really good. Kind of overtook Jake LaRavia's role for the most part, shooting almost 57% from 3 over the last 10 games or so. And then when you factor in, you add together Luke Kennard, Marcus Smart, Rui Hachimura, all those guys, really important role players for the Lakers. They're shooting a combined 48% from 3 on 15 3-point attempts per game over their last 5 games. So all those guys have been really confident. And I just think for the Wolves, you just got to force guys off the 3-point line. Don't overhelp too much on drives. And I think it's going to be really important for Jaden McDaniels to stay on the floor defensively, stay out of foul trouble. And then I think the Wolves really, really need Julius Randle to be a scorer in these matchups. He did a great job of that in the first round series against the Lakers last season. I think no doubt was energized by the fact that he was going up against LeBron James. We don't know if LeBron will play tonight. He's missed the last 2 for LA. But yeah, I think it's got to be a big night from Jaden defensively, and then Ant and Julius offensively, just because LA doesn't really have a whole lot of answers for either of those guys, at least on paper.
Yeah, Julia, weird team, the Lakers. Obviously they're the talk of the league with the Luka trade last year, and the hope being that they, with a full off season and then a full season of Luka and LeBron and Reeves, that they would be this transformational team, and that's been far from the case. They're battling for a top 6 seed, kind of like the Wolves. They're a little behind Minnesota right now. And we saw it in the playoffs last year. They lacked size and they lacked depth. And I wouldn't say they've really addressed that in any meaningful way. It still feels like a matchup where the Wolves are deeper and the Wolves are bigger.
Yeah, I also think that there's like a little bit of a psychological edge that the Wolves have. If you watch the Wolves for a while, I think Wolves fans would agree with me here. You come off a loss like the one to the Magic, and you talk about mental lapses, and then you're facing a team that you're battling in the standings in the Lakers, and a team that you have faced this year, but you're much better than the last times that you played. You're going in with a vengeance, and you're starting off a road trip too. So I think that there's that aspect. I 100% agree with Jack. I think defensively, this is great practice for the postseason for the Wolves defense, because in order to shut Luka down, you can't just rely on one or two guys defensively to do that, but you also can't make him your main focus either. And I think also offensively, relying on your big guys to be aggressive in the paint is something that you have to really take advantage of when you're playing a team like the Lakers. But I would say the biggest advantage that the Wolves have right now is that they're just on a get back after their last game. And that's something that we've seen them be successful in for years now. And so I would definitely favor the Wolves in this matchup, but I do think they'll be served some challenges, but I do think 10 p.m. late start as well. Not happy about that. It's so late. But I do think the Wolves have got it in them. I do see why they're favored in this one.
Yeah, late postcast for Jack Borman tonight and our guy Luke Spinman. Parker, this is a possible playoff preview against the Lakers. If they met again, would you expect a similar result?
As last year, I think
Yeah.
I think so. Now this matchup tonight, like Julia said, I'm upset it's a 10 p.m. matchup, because I think this could be a playoff type of game tonight. I'm glad Jack highlighted Jaden McDaniels, because I think he's such an important piece of, if this was a series, when this was a series, and tonight. And it starts with discipline for Jaden. We know the level of defender that Jaden is, and Jaden always will be. Now, can he continue to do that over 48 minutes and stay disciplined without fouling? And it's Luka. The refs are going to call fouls for him, so you can't be upset and draw another one. You have to continue to be disciplined. But to answer your question, Sam, I think so. I think this is a Wolves team that they're past a team like the Lakers, and but the 3-point shooting does scare me. That's something that Jack highlighted is anytime you think you are better than a team, the one way you can stay in games is those other guys continue to make shots, and that's something that I've seen throughout my career, and I've seen as I watched through on the NBA. But I think this road trip, Sam, is important. With this California trip and then plus Oklahoma City, this is a good opportunity. Like, you have to find a way to at least get 2 of these on this road trip, and that's the way I look at it. Is if you can go 2-2, that's successful. Anything other than that is icing on the cake.
Clinging to the 3 seed right now, and Jack, in closing, it sounds like Luka may not be getting any favorable officiating tonight.
I don't know. I mean, he was just fined $50,000 for flashing the money symbol at the refs that we've seen Rudy Gobert do in the past. So we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. But I have a feeling that whomever it is that's officiating tonight's game in Los Angeles, we'll be hearing from Luka Doncic throughout the game. No doubt about that.
You know how I hate the Wolves as favorites when they're at home, and I kind of love them when they're on a big stage in a primetime game, especially LA. This is where the Wolves thrive. This is where they show up. I'm expecting them to show up, and I think it'd be fun if LeBron played too. Let's get the full complement of Lakers on the floor. They might actually be worse with LeBron. That's maybe a conversation for another time. But this has been the Wolves Squad Show for today. Back on Thursday with more Wolves content. Again, we are a supplement to Ben Beacon's great coverage on Locked On Wolves. Make sure you check him out. For Jack, Julia, Parker, I'm Sam Ekstrom. Thanks for watching, listening, commenting, and subscribing. We'll talk to you next time.